I'm showing the baseline, right? Okay. You may validate the error, right? And did you try those? And I've changed it to a bunch of different forms, and it always causes that same error, right? Until I just, I think you gotta put this. You gotta put.
All right. So we're going to talk about, like Kabir said, some of the fundamentals, the basics of Guardian system that you may have run into in your travels and your work. The topics we'll talk about is advisor communication with Guardian, which includes Connection Manager and how to use that. We'll talk about serial number management, states and statuses, the advisor SPT line info block and its role, what it does, and talk about in-law and post-law rework. So at any point, if you have a question, just please stop me and we can discuss whatever you bring up. All right. So I'm sure most of you have run into some or many difficulties with advisor to Guardian connection. Right? How many of you have seen, like, you just won't connect no matter what you do? All the time, right? The connection between advisor and Guardian really depends upon, I'll try to display something on here. I don't know if you're good. I'm working on a document I'm going to finish and send out all of you so you have it, which covers all the topics we're talking about. Here's like a basic diagram of how a pretty simple network architecture looks like at a site, where you have the Guardian and it sits kind of in its own network, and then there's another network or VLAN which has a firewall where you have all the line levels. And when you try to connect, between advisor and Guardian, it has to go through that other network and connect through a firewall. There could be multiple firewalls, could be no firewalls. Up to the customer, so there's a lot of different environments. The basics for connectivity are a couple protocols. One is the SQL protocol, and one is called MSDTC, which is Microsoft Distributed Transaction Coordinator Protocol. We use these to communicate between our advisor database and our Guardian database. If you are trying to communicate from one network to another network, and there are firewalls in between, there are specific ports that these protocols communicate through, and they need to be allowed outbound and inbound through whatever firewall exists between our systems. Our Guardian prerequisites mention what these ports are, but I also put them in this document. So MSDTC by default uses port 135, but this port can be changed on the Guardian server, on the advisor, it doesn't matter. But if you want to do this, you have to coordinate with site IT to make sure they know which ports can be specified for only MSDTC use and allow those through the network firewall. Any questions about that? You guys know how to check MSDTC settings? Yeah.
DTC2 services.
Yeah.
A lot of times that's turned off or set to cancel. Or Those on the Guardian laptop, a lot of times you're going to check these services.
Right.
Can you explain exactly what MSDTC is? I mean, we all know what it refers to as far as the settings. What is it? What does that actually stand for, MSDTC?
Microsoft Distributed Transaction Coordinator.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. In this document, I'm also going to include a guide at the bottom for how to change ports. There's a guide I just got offline about how to do that. So if the IT says, okay, I'm allowing MSDTC, but only these ports, there's going to be a little step-by-step on how to change that. And I just found that online. Because it's a Microsoft service, there's a lot of information on the internet about it and how to use it and how to troubleshoot some aspects of it. The other protocol we use is the SQL protocol. By default, SQL is installed to communicate along port 1433. This can be changed, and sometimes the customer will install it on a different port, which is fine, as long as that port is allowed to communicate between networks or through any firewall that they have. You can check what port they installed on. There's a little picture here with steps. There's a program on Windows, well, that comes with SQL Server called SQL Server Configuration Manager, and I kind of walk you through on how to check the port. Yeah, because they allowed port 1433 based on our prerequisites, but then the team who installed the SQL Server installed it onto a different port. Communication's not going to work. So those are the protocols we use, and also the ping or TCP/IP protocol. That's, again, also listed in our prerequisites. So site IT people who are setting up the servers, should have those prerequisites and understand them. Any questions about anything so far?
What's the difference between default instance and named instance?
When you install SQL, you can specify how to name your SQL instance. And one choice that you have is called a default instance, where when you install SQL, that instance will take the name of your computer. Alternatively, you have the option to set a named instance, and a named instance is, it takes a computer name, backslash, and then whatever you call it, so like Guardian01 or some other specific name. And that will be the name of your SQL instance into which Guardian database is installed into. That kind of clear? So I'll show you what it looks like. If you'll be able to see, I don't know, it's pretty small, but basically I have SQL installed, right? And it's really small. But at the top here, I have my instance name, right? So SQL Server Manager lets me browse to whatever instance I connect into. And at the top is my actual instance name, which for me is my default instance. My server name is called Tokyo, and my SQL instance just took that name also. So when you connect to Guardian, what you're connecting to is just the SQL instance into which the Guardian databases are installed in. Guardian isn't an SQL instance, it's a database that exists within the SQL framework of a particular instance. Questions?
How would we know if the customer has a named instance versus a default instance?
You have to ask them, but yeah, that's really the only way. Because you're not going to, you shouldn't really be logging into Management Studio. So when you connect, when you're about to connect from Advisor to Guardian, you have to ask them what the SQL instance name is. Don't say what the Guardian name is, but what the SQL instance is. We have to ask the IT. There's only one I have.
Yeah. So often a named instance would have a different port number, right? So 1433 is usually by default the default instance port number, right? But when they create a named instance, often they will have a different port number. And most of your connection issues, because the prerequisite says 1433 has to be open, right? But they have a named instance which has a different port number. That port is probably not open in firewall. So when you call into PE, basically we check all of those. It's always because the port is not open. Always. It's no other thing. MSDTC works in hundreds of places.
Yeah, so it's always down to some port. So I'm sure most of you have also heard of the BTC ping utility. It's a Microsoft-provided program that you can find online, and it's used to troubleshoot connectivity specifically across the MSDTC protocol between two systems. There's a very handy guide online about how to use it, which is also on our SharePoint, and I'm also putting in this document, which walks you through a few of the various errors that you might be able to get, and then the proposed solution and what the errors mean.
This is good.
Yeah.
You should definitely have this.
Yeah.
You should definitely have this.
It's really important to, you know, a customer sees, oh, we're failing to connect, and they're going to immediately say it's Systech's responsibility and fault, and our system's not working. Well, that's not always the case, right? Because we're communicating along their network, and the DCC ping utility is very handy for removing our system from the equation, and taking.
I'm downloading it right now. We have to put this on the advisor though? Or?
Advisor and Guardian. Yeah, you put on the Advisor and Guardian, and then you follow this guide. Basically, you start on both. You put in the names of both systems, and on one you hit ping, and it'll try to connect to the other one, and then you do the reverse ping from the other one, and it'll tell you if it manages to connect or if it'll give you an error message.
And usually support does the same thing. They actually have the utility for the DCC ping and the reset DCC also.
Yeah. Yeah, just really handy, quick way to see what's actually going on, because you know, Connection Manager is just going to tell you an error. It's not very specific. Whereas this tool is going to be a bit more specific. There's more things you can try from following the errors, if you get any from this tool. Usually, again, one of the big ones is just port. IT or site IT will say they opened some port, and you know, you just have to keep hammering them until they actually either do it or make sure they do it. You know? So there have been cases where they, oh yeah, we did it, and they did do it. And that's really common in my experience.
Gene, when the customer enables Guardian for connection, is it referring to this port?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it'll be, you know, 135 or some other specified port. IT can specify specific ports that can be opened for MSDTC, and there are ways to change what ports MSDTC communicates through on the specific computer. So you can, you know, on the Guardian, with the blessing of the IT, is we're going to change what port range MSDTC can use. And again, this document will have an example of how to change that. You know, if they said we're opening ports 5,000 to 6,000 and MSDTC can use any one of those, you can configure MSDTC to only use that specific port range. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you.
All right. The Connection Manager, I'm sure all of you are very familiar with Connection Manager. It has a few buttons on it. There's two sides to Connection Manager. One is the advisor side, which is the connection to itself if you're on an advisor. If you're on a Sentry, you'll only have the advisor side of Connection Manager, and that will be the connection to the advisor that it's supposed to communicate to. So it asks for SQL Server name. On an advisor, it's always going to be the computer name, because when we install our SBT application, it will by default install a SQL Express instance and will take the computer name. If you ever change the IPC computer name, which you can certainly do, and I'm sure happens often, you have to come back into Connection Manager and reconnect to the new name. Connection Manager will probably have some errors when you first launch it after a rename. And you just put in your new name into the SQL Server name, and you hit connect. And it will refresh the connection to itself. And the right side is the Guardian side, which has a few more buttons, and it's the connection from the advisor database into the SQL instance where Guardian should fall. So TestDB Connect tests connectivity through the SQL protocol specifically. The TestDB Handshake tests only MSDTC protocol, and ping just pings the computer. And when you do connect, they'll try to establish a connection between the browser database and the Guardian SQL database along all three of those protocols. So if one of them doesn't work, then your connection's not going to work. And disconnect works very similar. If you already have a system connected, you want to disconnect it, all your protocols have to be enabled and have to have communication through all of them, even to disconnect.
So what's the best solution? We have Senti installed database. Next time we have Senti in the field, they make a database out of it, they install SQL. And it comes to the site, it has to connect back to the advisor now. So what's the best practice to eliminate that? See this Senti database. Because when you run this on a Senti, you're going to get this. Yeah.
You get both?
Yeah, because
It has to be re-imaged.
I've seen that before.
I mean, we eliminate it by sometimes just removing connection.
Yeah, but it causes other issues. It causes issues with SPT route info when it knows that it's the advisor. It has few things enabled automatically.
So we have a lot of machine learning stuff there, it says the advisor.
It's because we didn't do the right thing. That sentry should never be an advisor as it put back to sentry.
You can, especially before that advisor and Guardian things were available.
You can probably uninstall.
Uninstall it, right? I uninstalled it 3 times.
Yeah, we have that guide.
Well, you can just, I don't know if it worked, but you can try uninstalling. No, not even just SQL.
Yeah, just SQL.
It breaks some stuff in tips.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, there's a delete guide for anything before 8.0. 8.0 actually have an uninstall.
Really?
8.0 can uninstall tips. Before 8.0, you have to do the delete. The guide that we have about guides.
I was just recently in Omega, there was a Systech resource I was working on. He had this type of problem. I didn't know what to tell him, what.
The right thing to do is to re-image that. Put it back in the
PE, if it was me, I probably would go ahead and uninstall tips and change it. But I had the option where as an advisor that only had the Sentry.
How many you can just rerun the option.
How many rerun the advisor install.
It's the second installer that appears. What's the uninstaller?
Is it uninstall application of 8.0?
It's called. Yeah, well, pretty much that's really good.
I'll have to send the guide.
Once you install Advisor, it's just, it'll be an advisor. I don't know how to really change it back to the Sentry.
Which guy are you talking about?
The
How to remove it?
the technical note. Yeah, he just wrote it the other day.
Oh, it's a new one. I have the old one.
There's some,
Not that one, for 8.0.
there's like a registry here or something like that. You can turn it. If it's an advisor Sentry, turn off the advisor portion for a while. And switch it back. We had to do that for Lily all the time.
All right, so our next topic is, so any questions about connectivity? I know it's kind of quick, but.
You didn't have anything on the host files.
I did not. You want to talk about it?
Well, so I always put all the machine IPs and names on the advisor and the Guardian. They're necessary. Because I had some people say, why are you doing all that overkill? It's not going to hurt anything.
Yeah, I mean, so a host file is basically a list of IPs and machine names that your computer references to either sometimes force traffic. So let's say, like on your advisor, if you know your Guardian machine name and you know your IP, you can put that in the host file, and when it's pinged by IP or by machine name, your computer or that advisor will always associate that specific IP with that specific machine name. It helps sometimes because it will kind of force that relationship. You know, when you try to ping by machine name through command prompts and you don't have anything in your host file, it'll browse the whole network for that name and then try to find that IP. But when it knows what the IP is, it's like a bit of a booster pack or whatever, like helps it a little bit. So it is pretty handy to do. It also depends on how the networks are set up. We've had a problem in the old building where we had two different IPs. We had like 10.0.0 and we had a 10.0.3, so different subnets, right? The communication between both works, but only if you put it into your host file. So if you had one, like an advisor on the 10.0.0 network and a guardian on 10.0.3 on different subnets, by default, they couldn't communicate with each other. You had to put it into your host file to allow communication. Because then it would like force, okay, I know that where I'm going, so I can find it easier. It's like having directions to your friend's house, you know. Instead of trying to go door to door, you know exactly where to go to. Yeah. So it helps. You don't need to put it, so on a particular machine, you don't need to put itself in the host file. You just put any other system it needs to talk to. But I mean, it certainly helps. It doesn't hurt anything. The only reason, well, there is one case where it can hurt something. If the machines that we're talking about have dynamic IPs, the IP can change after a restart, and your host file is now invalid, and it's actually causing probably more of a problem.
I think what happens is like you have your advisor and Sentry connection.
Yeah.
So if you put your, and then you have your advisor and guardian connection, it's different. I saw where people are putting the advisor name in there.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need to do that. And obviously that causes a problem if you have two IP addresses. One for guardian talk and one for Sentry talk. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So one's on like a 192 network and the other one's on like a 10, whatever.
Oh.
So that causes
Yeah, it might. We have situations where like there's a guardian server, which also has a multiple network or multiple network cards, and sometimes like the network card that's connected to some other network, not our manufacturing network, causes issues with our manufacturing network and connectivity. You know, that happens too. Yeah, but I mean the host file definitely helps. How to use it internally, use it externally. Try it without it, but it's like a, you know, kind of a first thing to try. But thank you for bringing that up. I forgot about that. Anything else?
One other question on our MSDTC settings. From what I recall, my last Sector 7 projects, all MSDT settings have been the same once we got on site to enable connection. Are there any instances where the settings are not what we've been selecting and what we've been changing the file to?
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes local IT will not set MSDTC settings properly, so you always have to check it. And that's done. It's pretty simple. It's on the server under admin tools, so you can go to start, admin tools, and component services.
Right.
And it's just under computers, my computers, distributed transaction.
this is a different place on 8, by the way.
Well, I'm on my Windows Server 2008.
Right?
Yeah, this is my Guardian server.
Or that it was in a different spot. I had to
Yeah,
hunt and found it.
and then it's under Security tab. Once you right-click on Local DTC and hit Properties, and it should look like. And this is in our requisite.
Right. My question was, are there any projects where these are not what our normal settings are for us when we get in the field.
No, it will always be this.
Okay, thank you.
On version 8, it's different.
No, I'm sorry, it's on the old version.
Yeah, the old
The new
version.
one is right where the PTC goes all the way to the bottom of that
Yeah.
screen. The other version is up.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so.
Yeah,
That's
so
something that needs to be updated.
on XP, which, is being phased out, it's just under My Computer and Properties on XP, or Windows Server 2005, which are older systems. And there's the MSDTC tab, which will be a bigger screen than this. I don't know why I don't know.
They moved, yeah, so I got to a site, I'm like, oh man, I gotta go to the board.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think they've changed it in newer Windows Server versions. I think it's the same. But now browsing on newer Windows versions has been annoying because they kind of go with the whole tile system. When you click start, it's just all these tiles. Kind of annoying. So one more thing. So when you do try a connection, right, you have to have a line connection created in Guardian. So, when you have a line, and then you create a line connection under that line. So like I have a whole bunch, and under line connection, you specify your advisor name and allow connection, and you set it as advisor, and then you save. And this will tell the Guardian to expect a connection from that specific machine name or that specific advisor. If you don't have this checked, you're going to have a 717 error on Connection Manager. It'll say, I think it just says 717. I don't even know if it gives you an error message. Or it used to just say 717. And it's because you don't have allow connection checked.
Gene, is it absolutely necessary for the whoever's managing the Guardian from the customer to have the host, just as it is with the advisor, makes it connections?
What? Sorry, you were really broken up. I heard something about Guardian Manager and responsibility to have something set up.
My question was, is it absolutely necessary for the customer managing the Guardian to have the host file settings the same as we do in Advisor?
Well, they will just be a little different. So what you can do, like I said before, not absolutely necessary, but they can help if you're having connection issues. And what you would do is just your advisor name. So I'll show you what mine is. I don't even know how to see it.
32 drivers. Yeah.
So you just specify the name of your advisor system.
Right.
Well, anyway, it's like it calls scheme IP and then machine name. But you don't need to reference itself. You just put in, advisor. Yeah, it's not absolutely necessary, but it can help with connection issues.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So the next topic is about serial numbers and serial number management. There's a few ways to get serial numbers into Guardian. One of which is manually. You specify a range, start and end range. Or what's now becoming more common within the past 6 years is numbers are provided by some external number range management system. Systems like SAP, our unit trace product. And those enterprise level systems manage numbers, and we communicate to them through various protocols to receive, either ranges of numbers or lists of numbers. And the way that works is Guardian will make a request to that system. Right? That system passes serial numbers down. We store them in some tables, right, in the database. And at this point, they're all called available numbers. And you can see what numbers you have on the Guardian under, there's a couple of screens for showing you what numbers you have. It's under data viewers. And there's number lists and availability, which show you what number of lists you have available for what packaging level and what product and how many. And there's also a number range allocation where you have the availability tab, which shows you what serial number ranges you have available for what packaging level and for what product. So you can check these here. Availability means that they have, the numbers it shows you here have not been used. So if you have a row that has like, received 100,000 and have 900,000 remaining, that means you have 900,000 unused numbers. So it stores them all as available. Right? When advisor requests numbers, it gets them from, let's say you just imported some numbers, you haven't run any lots, that you run a lot, advisor will request numbers from that available pool that you have set up and available. And that's, again, depending on what advisor configuration you have. Let's say you have a cart and case, and you have cart and case numbers in Guardian. You start the lot, and it will request those numbers from available. When you run a lot and end it, any numbers you haven't used get returned to Guardian and are stored separately and considered return numbers. And return numbers, it's important to understand that return numbers are stored separately than available numbers. Use them very differently. When you start subsequent lots for the same product, advisor will request for serial numbers, and Guardian will deliver some numbers that have never been used and some numbers which have been returned. So it will usually do a combination of both. We've had some bugs in our system where it completely ignores return numbers, but in newer versions and some hotfixes, that's been fixed. So after you run your lot, all serialization data comes back to Guardian with the end lot button that returns serial numbers and all the states and statuses that all used serial numbers have, all hierarchy and relationship information. And that's stored in Guardian. In a lot of cases, it's notified automatically or manually back to the system where we received serial numbers from the beginning. So it knows the state of what happened to the serial numbers it gave out.
So we're talking about ranges here, right? And another.
Let's do.
Let's just have a return pool.
Yeah, they're return.
But it's not viewed.
It's actually a little bit different. They go back. So if you're requesting random numbers or numbers from an imported list, any unused return numbers, they actually go back into the list that they came from. I guess it needs to be updated. Yeah, you'll notice that there's no returned tab. Your number range allocation, there's a returns tab, which shows you what was returned. But number list doesn't have it. It actually goes back into the list that came from. There's like certain flags in the database which control all these operations.
Yeah, so in a list, when you are actually actively running a lot, the available number under availability shows to be much less, but then when you end the lot, the number goes back up again based on what was returned back. Versus as a range, that it doesn't happen. The range, the availability goes down, but then when you end the lot, the return pool goes up.
Right. Yeah, so you're right. This is more applicable to ranges, but something similar happens to the list, where it just goes back into the same storage area. Is that clear? Questions about that? I know it's kind of very, very brief.
This is a good diagram.
Yeah. It'll be in this document that I want to send out. Do you have a list of who's attended?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not gonna, unfortunately, not gonna remember everything.
Well, it has to go to the FE for everyone.
Well, there's none of these two. Did you do a course list?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So yeah, any questions about this? It's a pretty simple diagram about just data flow. You know, this is really the whole point. This right here, this arrow, notification of lot events, is the whole point of serialization. Nothing, the business, the customer does not care about anything else. But this, I mean, it does, but you know, nothing is as important as this to the business. Doing that.
I may have missed it, but did you go over the DSN file?
No,
On the connection manager?
I don't even know what that is or remember what it is. You want to go over it?
Yeah, you know the connection manager has a line. Yeah, above connect, it gives you a path, and it points to a DSN file. It's actually ODBC configuration, right? That the report advisor advanced report uses, right? Whenever your report doesn't work, it's because that file doesn't have the right information in it. Or maybe you try to do the ODBC connection and the password went away. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah.
The password disappears.
Yeah, see the DSN file, the path. If you go to that path, you will find two DSN files. One of them is called the advisor reports. The other one is called the guardian reports. Anytime your reports doesn't work, sometimes when your connection manager doesn't work, right, it fails. Sometimes because of that file. So, for example, if you're in a domain, you should have a line inside of the DSN file that says network something, right? If you're not in a domain, if that line is there, your report wouldn't work. So on an advisor, if you have these two files, if you open it in Notepad, so these are configuration of what you're supposed to have in order for the advanced reporting feature of Advisor to go out and get the information that it needs for the lot from Guardian database. Same thing for Advisor.
So if these files aren't here, you would have an issue.
Yeah, these files are by default always there
Right.
when you install, but the connection manager updates it with the host name of the Guardian and all that.
And then we request reports, basically use this password to connect.
Yeah. Anytime the report doesn't work, that's where the problem is.
It'll come up blank, right?
Yeah. Or when you go to the lot, it just shows the asterisk, but not the lot.
So to resolve, can you manually just enter all this stuff in?
Yeah. That's what
We had an issue where we were setting connecting advisor to Guardian and then the Sentries to advisor, and that file wasn't updating on connection successful, connected, but the file wasn't updating. So the second you left that, you couldn't start a lot because it would tell you that it can't find things.
Yeah, in CDV. Yeah. So just keep that in mind. That file is kind of important.
Right, let me make a note. DSN file. Just things to include in my document.
All right. See that network line?
Yes.
If you're in a domain and that network line shows exactly what it shows here, DB MS SOCN, it's not gonna. The reports don't work. When you connect your domain, whatever the domain name is, it needs to go in there.
Right? Automatic is supposed to update.
Yeah,
but sometimes it doesn't.
sometimes it doesn't.
So you replace the network name, or what do you?
And like the connection manager is supposed to update this file, sometimes.
Yeah. So if you had like a specific network or domain, would you put it
Yeah.
first with the backslash, or just instead of this value?
Instead of that, just put in the, yeah,
So if we were a Systech, it would just like,
and then you save it. And then
you have to do any like reset or anything, or you just
no,
modify
you
the
do
file?
this and it works.
Saves.
Yeah, save.
Oh, I don't want to save. That's pretty cool. I really have additions to that. All right. Right. So we covered basically serial numbers.
Test them with it.
Yeah, if you test it, it gets rid of the password.
Or not.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but then it gets rid of the password.
All right.
I just wanted to mention another thing. Often there is connection manager on the desktop, right? That connection manager also has a version, right? But then you do an upgrade, for example, right? You were in 735, then you upgrade to 740, right? Often, I've seen a lot of people use the desktop connection manager, which is a 735 connection manager, and you always run into issues that it doesn't connect.
Right.
Get rid of the desktop one.
Well, so I'll comment about that. If we're talking about anything below version 8, that's very important. Oftentimes, you have people put either a shortcut or the actual program on desktop, which is good to do because it makes it easy to access. But you always have to make sure you're using the right version, like Pierre said. If you're on 740 and you try using 735 connection manager, well, it might not work. It's doing different stuff behind the scenes. When we're talking about version 8, when you install Advisor or Sentry, it's automatically going to create a connection manager shortcut. Because now Connection Manager it's no longer a standalone executable. It has some supporting files which need to be in the same directory as the executable. So this shortcut is pointed to a directory where Connection Manager is created with all its supporting files. So it's automatically put into dtips bin Connection Manager. Yeah. So there's like some supporting files. So this will automatically be created. Don't delete the shortcut because you need it. Just using executable is fine if you're executing it from the directory, but if you just copy the program onto the desktop, it won't work. It gives a bunch of errors. And when you upgrade this version, it will upgrade the connection manager, and the shortcut will still be active. Correct. Is that clear? Any questions?
The naming for connection manager, I've seen it go both ways. I don't know how far it goes back. You used to have the computer name / and then the database name.
Or over here?
Yeah.
That's named instance versus
Right.
default.
Yeah, so it's never a database name, it's SQL instance name. So it could be something like, my computer / SQL instance. So it's never the Guardian name. Guardian, all it is a database, but it's installed into a SQL instance, which might be a named instance, which has that / a named instance, the IT has to tell you what it is. Server computer name / something. And I have to tell you that. A lot of times it's just
both ways. Where
yes. A lot of times it's just the SQL server name, which is the default instance, which is just the name of the computer name of the server that you're on. All right. So I briefly mentioned states and statuses when I talked about serial numbers. Anyone know the difference between a state and a status? Anyone tell me?
or states. There could be multiple statuses.
Right. I wish I could show you, but my connection is dying. Basically, there's only a few, like Doug said, there's only a few states, and these are,
Those?
yeah, moving connection. Might not work fine. Am I in the meeting?
Yeah. But I don't see,
Yeah,
connection manager.
change my screen. And just drop it. Well, anyway, so there's a couple states. Basically, there is commissioned, decommissioned,
Not commissioned.
well, and there's like,
Practice has state.
there's a state that's like nothing. Basically, just kind of middle ground, like floating in space. Nothing's happened to it yet. You can sometimes call it allocated.
Is foreign state? Foreign?
No, not really.
Foreign.
Okay, I think we get back. I mean, the main ones are basically commissioned, decommissioned. There's like substates, which are aggregated and not aggregated. So when you have an SPT object. What is an SPT object? An SPT object is, any case, carton, bottle, pallet, anything where you assign a serial number in Advisor, we can consider that an SPT object. When an object is first born, so to say, that's when the first ifs block, when something happens to an object. Like, you ever watch ifs engine view, or ifs engine, when you have like the counters go up? Each counter that goes up, that's a new object. Right? So you have an object that goes through all the flows in Advisor, or through all the blocks. That's one object moving through all of them. And when the count goes up, that object moving through those blocks, starting at the start command. So when you have a start, it goes into the next block. That's that object starting to move along that path. So any object that starts that path has a state, which is commissioned, decommissioned. Like allocated is kind of the state it has when it first starts its journey through the if blocks. And then it's like substates, like, I call them substates, like aggregated or not aggregated. Does that kind of make sense about states? There's only a few ways to modify a state, and that's by performing actions on it, like commissioning it with a set status block, or an aggregation block, or decommissioning it either manually or at the end of a lot automatically. The aggregation versus no aggregation, it depends on how your if stream is configured. Does that make sense? Kind of. So statuses are different. So this table is called Lot Data Summary in the newer versions. It tells you what the state and status of all your items are. The status is basically user-defined or configuration-defined. They come from the menu line status code. So when you have advisor blocks like aggregation, set status, we're setting a status to your objects. Basic ones are items commissioned, items decommissioned, items packed. There's a whole big list of default ones that are used. As an object passes through different blocks and different stations, there's different statuses we apply, baselines like exited cartoner, or if it fails for some reason, we'll apply a status of like failed vision inspection or something. So your lot data summary will tell you all the states and statuses of your objects. If they had any failure, it will tell you what it also failed for. I think some failures can also be a state. I don't remember.
So state that really shows up in lock control in lock rework, right? Any item that hasn't been commissioned or decommissioned or packed is not commissioned, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the commissioned, and then the decommissioned, and then the packed. Packed is whether or not it's aggregated to someone else, right? The statuses are something that I can use to track them through different places. Sometimes, like you want to inspect it, right, but not commission it. But then you want to later on inspect it again, check to see whether or not the status is a certain status, and if it is true, then you can commission it. You know what I mean? So exited partner, and then you re-inspect it, and required status is now exited partner. You know what I mean? That way, no one puts something else in that doesn't have the same status.
Right, and we don't ever capture the history of a status. We only capture the last known status of a particular object. So if it was removed from the stream, like at exited partner, that's the status it will have. It will never have the history of the status. So only last known status. Those are some weird things that happen if you have like vision failures. Sometimes, I think I've seen the state change, I can't remember. It can get weird. Basically, you would have to see what all of it is. That kind of makes sense about statuses. So these are all, again, determined by your advisor IPS configuration.
You go to the line status codes.
Here's all the default available ones that can be used. You can add whatever ones you want, and then they'll be available to be selected in your advisor system. It's just a list of defaults except for test and test. Those are.
So the drop downs in advisor IPS is populated from this. Right?
Yep. Same thing actually about global packaging levels. So when you create a product, you have to have global pack levels created. And those are the ones you see in the drop-down in IPS under item type. All of these global pack levels and status codes too also have an internal ID, which still IPS will display to you and will look for a certain internal ID. So you ever go to like an item type drop-down and you have like the number 5 or 50 next to the item type? That's referencing the internal ID of like a global packaging level or a line status code. There's an internal association between those in the Guardian database, between the level name or like the status and the internal identifier. And still, it searches that combination. So sometimes you might have an issue. Let's say you create an advisor archive on one system that's connected to one Guardian, and you want to copy that advisor archive to another system that's connected to a different Guardian. Well, sometimes you have to go back through IPS and make sure all your drop-downs are set correctly, because the internal identifier on one server might be different than on another server. If people added their own custom levels, or depending on also the upgrade history of that server.
Can you go to the SQL manager and open the team?
Can I? Yes, I want to.
Yeah, just get that.
I just have a typo. I can't see it. Yeah.
So you see how the number on the left, on the first column SPT object type ID has a 50 starting from row number 6, right? The one that he has highlighted, it has 50 written on it, right? That's your carton. So that's why you always see 50 cartons on the IPS dropdown, right? What he was talking about is before ES was introduced, these were not there. IPS added them by default. But what they did was they left a little room between the first default, which was the first 4 packaging level, 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Those 4 were always there from 734 and on, right? But then ES started putting default packaging level, but they started from 50. That gave you some room if you added custom packaging level, would have been in 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. It left you that room, so nothing would be updated when you upgrade the software. So what happened is, sometimes when I have a 735 system where I manually added a packaging level called carton, it would be in a ID number 5. But the ES baseline is created with the new Guardian software, which Carton has called out as 50. So when you load that archive, it gives you all kind of weird error that the packaging level is not found and stuff like that, because in that Guardian 50 doesn't exist. 5 exists, because the other thing that it does is when you upgrade a system that has the packaging level called Carton as number 5, it skips number 50. It doesn't add the same packaging level again because it's already there. But now the IDs are different. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
A lot of the Alcon sites have this issue.
I think a lot of times change the item types and all.
Yeah, Alcon force.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to always go to every single class and change. Just clicking on it is all that's needed.
But I'm sure we talked about it. Like,
It is.
so, yeah, it's an important point. And same exact thing for line side of the code. Harmonization. That's important. Any questions about anything? Guardian, life.
I just had a quick question about the whole thing. Just going back to the host files. I think I was on a project of hers, and I think like the way that I think if you helped me on this, like the way that the host files was set up is that there was an advisor and there was 2 sentries, and then they were all on the line network, and then they had a Guardian connection that was going up to the customer network that was on, like, I think Ethernet connection 2, and the host files for the sentries, they both had the advisor and IP address, and for the Guardian connection, it was like I think you helped me set this up. It was like a Guardian through advisor. So you had the host file, you had the IP address for that advisor, but then you also had the machine name of the Guardian. Like, is that a way to set it up?
It's a workaround.
Yeah.
It has been addressed in 40 something.
Yeah, there was, on some older versions, there was an issue where, like, you're on Sentry, and you're trying to start a lot from advisor, and Sentry tells you no Guardian connection. You're like, what are you talking about? So the workaround was, in the Sentry host file, you route the Guardian to itself. So every machine's self-identification is 127.0.0.1, and that's the machine's internal identification for itself. So you put that, 127, and then you put the Guardian in. So you're basically telling the Sentry that I'm the Guardian, and then that error goes away for some reason. The latest versions, I guess, resolve that.
Yeah. We also, sometimes 127.0.0.1, which is a loopback, sometimes doesn't work. So on the Sentry, but we typically do it for the IP address of the advisor, but the Guardian host. But both of those are the same idea, is that you're calling that host, that Guardian name, and it has an IP address that it can validate quickly. Like Sentry pings it as well. Okay, I see it. That's fine, no problem. That's all it's needed, is to full.
When you put the host name of in Sentry, you put the IP address of the advisor and you call the Guardian. And that's not conflict with the actual.
No, because the DB monitor, which when you go to DB monitor, it shows the Guardian and constantly pings it. All that it's doing is pinging someone under that host name and saying if it sees it, right? The SPT lot info block, if that fails, that monitor fails, SPT lot info block blindly says, all right, I don't have Guardian connection, so I can't start a lot. It doesn't really know that it doesn't have a Guardian connection. The only thing it's looking at is DB monitor. DB monitor says, oh, I can't ping this guy.
I think his question was like having 2 entries which reference the same IP but have different names. So I think that's okay. It won't
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, because it'll look up, right? Because in Connection Manager you specify by name, and then it looks in that table by name. It says, oh, I'm this IP. Then it'll look at the other name and say, okay, I'm this IP also. I don't think there's a conflict.
I mean, host file is no different than what a DNS server does. It resolves name to an IP, right? So this is Sentry resolving against the host file.
Right.
I don't think we have to do that anymore on the other version. It has been addressed.
I've only seen it sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, not always, I don't know. I think it was just like, because when the Century, I mean, I think the customer was just like, when we accessed the QA screen, on like the bottom tab, you would like get the no guardian connection, so they were just kind of like, it was kind of like a fixer of that.
Well,
That's it.
Yeah, that's the other one.
we just go to, I have the,
Yeah, if you don't have Guardian in the FPGA,
I've seen it, but I always
it doesn't let you go. It just hangs there.
I have the one here, it's a registry key. Systech tips connection with Guardian, and you change the D word to 00000. But if it's 00001, then I think it's an advisor. So this resets a Sentry, not to look for Guardian. You know that one?
Which one?
I have yours, a note, it says, reset Sentry, not to look for Guardian. Came from James a while back. So it's just a registry,
Oh, yeah, you create a batch file.
batch file, yeah. And then you run that and it's all good.
Yeah, it's in the
Or I open it in text editor and see what it does. And it changes that. All it does is change that last 0 from a 1 to a 0.
Yes. He has it in
Yeah, I don't know. There's something about this too when you're doing, you had on there,
That one is different.
like a standalone rework station.
Yeah.
And in that situation, you have to do something like this as well because it's a Sentry. It's not an advisor.
Acting like a Sentry, yeah.
But it has to look for a Guardian.
Yes.
Yeah, so then that you have to change this. Kind of tricky.
This is a in-lot rework station. So it's like a
Standalone.
separate laptop running in-lot rework.
Amgen.
Nothing other besides the not rework?
Yeah, it's all it is. So you, it's a lot of times, I think it's,
It's kind of like a post-lot, but not really. It's like in-lot.
it has its own hand scanner, its own printer, and all this stuff.
What's in-lot rework? We usually have like the customer having their own laptop. There's something, I don't remember what was that, but we have to remove some entries in the registry, make it connect to the connect to manager. No, the tips removed. You have to remove some kind of entries in the registry to make it talk. Yeah.
Are you talking about like that Wyatt, what we saw?
I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
So I usually install Sentry on it, on the remote laptop.
Right.
Install Sentry, put a special baseline that connects to the advisor, and you have to fool that it looks for the Guardian, otherwise it doesn't go to a rework screen. And then make the archive in a way it looks like post-lot rework, where it doesn't have filter or anything. You basically go and boom, it goes right into
What type of system is this?
It's a in-lot rework, but on a laptop because they don't want to use the advisor screen to do the rework.
Really?
They want to have a separate one. All the Navarro sites have it.
Really? I've never heard of that before.
Like Amgen had it too.
Engine. The first time I saw that was an engine. We have to remove some entry in the registry. We could not get that laptop to talk to the advisor. As far as the in-lab.
Yeah, all the Navarro sites I've done it. Install Sentry or a special archive that I created that doesn't have anything other than just.
So is it like an additional Sentry that sits under that advisor?
Mhm.
So like in my diagram here it would be, so here's your normal Sentry, and then you have another one,
Yeah, like that.
and that's an in-lot only Sentry. Really? And that works just fine.
And sometimes they even have its own printer. And they be running the machine and they be doing a lot of rework.
The scanner and printer and all that stuff sitting on
Alright,
it.
so it's kind of just post up, it's under the advisor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Amgen Louisville has it.
I know people are doing that.
Really? Because it's the way the advisor is legally located, it's not convenient for the operators. But the printer is inside of the machine.
Right, yeah. Kind of.
Are you still going to go over how to provision more numbers?
Yeah.
Because that comes up a lot for us. It's like, if we can't get a hold of PE or whatever, don't have Wi-Fi, we lose a lot of time. Yeah, but I always forget it.
Yeah, one second.
I had to create, like at Amgen, for instance, I had to create a range of like 100,000 numbers, but I had to go in and change a bunch of stuff. So I just threw, 000 1000 and 000 1200 or something. I thought it would work. It didn't. PE came back and said, oh, I just busted a bunch of stuff, so I had to,
So you gotta be careful with when importing numbers, because if it's a test guardian, it's okay. We play around with it. But we really don't want some of these numbers that we randomly create to go anywhere where they would use it for stuff. Yeah, and one of these numbers go into a product that itself, man.
I started something, ran some tests, ended the lot, and it took about an hour and a half to end the lot.
Yeah. Well, that was 736 when it couldn't reconcile.
Yeah. So I was running some issues, just reprovisioning it. And what was the situation? They were chewing them up like crazy. So they burned through like 1,000 in an hour. And this was at Alcon, right? And then, so that was one of the settings, was how many we were using per minute. And it was just flying through them. We were in lot, but not actually running any product, but we still chewed them all up.
That's misconfiguration.
That's the budget configuration.
Yeah, misconfiguration.
So that kind of stuff.
If we're going through numbers that fast, it's a configuration along somewhere.
And they didn't have any more because it was China. So they had to go, oh, that's what it was, on Novartis, Barcelona. They had to call the SAS, it was a Saturday. We were supposed to work Saturday and Sunday, and we couldn't do anything because we ran out of numbers. We couldn't get a hold of those guys. They're in China.
Yeah,
it was a mess.
You have to be pretty careful. Obviously. It's really like,
I always work Saturday and Sundays.
usually if you have errors in your if block, sometimes you might have like an if block that it's just, that's what it's doing. It's just, you're just taking numbers. Usually because you won't have like a tag trigger or anything, or any kind of rate or anything. It'll just be like get number, or basically it'll start erroring out and like going through hundreds a second, thousands a second. Yeah, you have to be really careful that the archive you have won't just jump into eating up numbers. One way of doing that, is with the rate. Right? By default, our baselines have a unit set rate.
Yeah.
You can set the parts per minute. Even if you have errors in the stream, it's not going to just churn through thousands of numbers in a second. Right? So
It was like
a certain rate.
we were doing something else, and we went back to go do it. We're like, where happened all the numbers? Like an hour later, everything was gone. We're like, oh. I see that mostly because of the there's no tag trigger to stop the stream. Yeah.
Yeah. So
we keep getting numbers. So you go to break, you come back. One stuff started adding numbers. Yep. So we see archives like that come in, that kind of errors to keep getting numbers.
yeah, I mean, so two things, right? The obviously the stream has to have either a starting point or an end point, right? A gate, right? Without a gate, it's gonna keep on looping through. But I've seen the reason it sometimes does it. It's not intentional, not because the PE made a mistake. It's because if you constantly go from preview to if view, sometimes you will see that the blocks are like close together, but they're not really connected. When you go back to preview, you'll see that it's got the thunder icon in between. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's because they're next to each other, but they're disconnected.
But this should be the default, not that over
Yeah, I know. You should always go here.
I hate that over view, man. I don't know what they put in on Builder.
I mean,
really hate
it's easy to see sometimes, but sometimes they're disconnected.
It's slow. There was one time where I had like so many plots for one product, and it'll take like 10 minutes to open.
Yeah, sometimes
I hate that view.
Which one? Log view or
No, the tree view is the best. Yeah, the other one is shit.
I don't like.
I don't know who came up with that, but it's shit.
that's weak. That's weak.
It shows in the red.
I mean, I know the new FPs, they love it, but that's probably because they learn it like that.
No, you really can't. Yeah.
Maurice showed me this, and I stay with this, man. Come Maurice way.
Yeah, but which one is it? It's like accurate.
The other one,
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about, right? Sometimes they're connected, but they're not.
The other one is good to configure it.
This is Daniel troubleshooting.
You got to go on his own.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So let's assume that you have cartons, and then you have also numbers for I don't know, a case. So in the event that you run out of numbers for the cartons, and we haven't, this is a test guardian, how do you, if you run out of numbers and you need to re-add them, how can you do them without purging the guardian?
So if you're on a Guardian laptop, the new images have some numbers already preloaded. But if you ever put in your own numbers and you want to add more, the easiest way is with ranges.
Yeah.
And all you need to do is, let's say you're on 36 and up, right? Let's say you find your product, you find your last number. So, sorry, I know it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but you have this N number column, right, under availability. First, you have to find your packaging level and your product. And this is also in chronological order, so the latest one or last in order, unless you sort them. But by default, it's whatever is in descending order. So your latest ones are at the bottom. So you would take your last current number, right? So this is SG296. I don't know if you can copy it, but you can write, just write it down.
Yeah.
And then under the manual provision entry screen here on the left, you would select your product, right? Select your even if you're doing a pallet number, you still have to select the product. Select the product, select what format it is, select your packaging level, and then you would just put your last number, whatever that is, plus 1, right?
Yeah.
So not exactly last number, but one higher or a couple higher. And then you just put quantity and add in, I don't know, however many you need, 1 million, 10 million.
Yeah, I understand that, but my question is, let's say you use them all, you cannot go any higher. Can you?
Well,
You
put
have
in a
to
different,
purge?
put in a different GSIN.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what kind of number you use, you can modify like the header information.
Yeah.
By just one digit, and it's a completely new number. You can
You
start.
use it on-
Yeah. So let's say you have a GSIN that's, it's 14 digits, right? And the GSIN is something, and you just change one of the digits. That's a completely new GSIN.
Yeah.
And you can just do that for that product. I mean, if it's just test numbers, it doesn't really matter what the GSIN is, right? You just
You burn through all of those numbers?
No, it's just
That's a lot of numbers.
it was a project that
Configuration that.
they were running the SEC, but they didn't have their Guardian set up yet, so they were using a Guardian laptop, and we had a lot of issues with the numbers, and I just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna purge it. So then I purged it, and then I had to re-add everything. I was like, is there a way just to remove the ones that we were using that we
No,
didn't
you can
need to
disable. You can disable, but it remembers those numbers.
Yeah, so that's why I had to go and purge it, and then I just got yelled at. But, oh well.
Yeah, there's no select or remove. It's either mark disable, but it knows what you use, or you get rid of everything. There's no select because it's just too complicated. So select or remove numbers because there's a whole history of each number.
So you can't remove them unless you purge, correct?
So for a range, Guardian does overlapping checks, right? So if you have a range already in Guardian from 1 to 2,000, and then you try to import 1,500 to 3,000, it will not allow you because it's overlapping. As long as you're a little off, then it will allow you. But if there's a gap, does it allow you or check the last one? So if I import from 1,000 to 2,000, then I import 3,000 to 4,000. Can I import 2,000 to 3,000 later?
Now you can. Before you couldn't. Now you can.
Yeah, in the past it wouldn't allow you to do. It checks the last in the range, the highest number.
Yeah. Now you can, like, if you had a gap, you could fill the gap, or you could always look at the last high number.
So that's for range, but for list, for like China, it only checks the header information. It doesn't actually check every single item.
No, it doesn't.
For list?
Oh yeah.
No.
Yeah.
China?
Yeah.
What version?
Every version.
No.
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 Every number gets checked for uniqueness.
For a list?
Yep. I think it should. Absolutely. No, that's the whole point. Yeah. It does. So for China, it's a partial random number. It does the range for the range portion, then it checks like the whole string for uniqueness. Especially like, and not just list the numbers, not even China, because China is also like a special case. Just regular lists, it checks every single number. That's why it takes a while to import.
No, that's true. I tried to import like the same file by a different name, and then messed up, and it said these numbers have already been imported.
So you change what?
I just changed like the file name. I didn't change like the number pattern or anything. It's just the name of the file that I was importing. And it's like, hey, these numbers are ready for imported.
And checks, and also file name is also important too. File name would be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think what I did was I put start number, and then I figured out, 100,000 later, and I put the end number.
Yeah, just a quantity.
So instead of doing quantity, for some reason I just didn't like it like that, where I put a start number to end number. For some reason,
Well, your start number has to follow correct formatting. Depends on what. It's sensitive to the format that you choose, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I just typed something in. I don't have it.
No, I don't think I looked at that other table to see what the last number used was either. So I was just creating something.
Yeah.
Anyway, P jumped and fixed everything.
I just did a check 736. So the same file with they copied a bunch of numbers, they pasted the numbers again. Same file.
Okay.
And then they imported and allowed it.
Shouldn't allow it. Chart on 740. And make sure check range overlaps. Check. You know that one?
Yeah.
That should actually be checked for specifically in channel numbers.
I'll check it out.
Nothing that changed so fast. Does that answer your question about replenishing channel numbers? I mean, it depends on, if it's a Guardian laptop, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Right? If you're on a customer system, it depends
Well,
on.
usually customers, they handle their own running.
We do remotely.
Well, yeah.
They don't handle it.
Dave, I had a question in chat.
Did we lose it? One thing that was, I think you were involved, you were busy all day. We couldn't figure out like the SA password, and I know Cactus Pound 1 or whatever to get the thing turned on. And it was asking for more like admin passwords, but it was really funny because we messed with it all day. At the end of the day, I was shutting it down and I closed this window. So on the backdrop of the laptop was all this stuff. It's right there. We couldn't get a hold of you, and Al didn't know what it was either.
On the Guardian laptop? Yeah. I mean, like a background.
That was hilarious.
Yeah.
So now I know to look there.
Yeah, it should be there on all of them. But all the information is always the same for each laptop.
Yeah.
Like, same as
And once you knew it, but I didn't know what it was. I was just blinded.
It's right there all the time.
And then I
Jared, where did you find that? Jared, what was that scenario?
So if you won't have it here, but if you close the Guardian configuration maker on the desktop, the backdrop gives you the Guardian IP address. Password.
But, yeah, so, the Guardian laptop, there they have some basic information on the background. On the desktop. It'll be like computer name, the SQL name, like your guard admin password, some configuration manager users, like a test user, like a super user, and yeah, the IP. And this information is just pulled from like that machine's information telling you what all that stuff is.
Use that application to build your own
BG info, yeah.
So what I was going to say about the other setting is I think it's in the decom or something, but it's the enable Wi-Fi and plug-in at the same time. IT here always turns that off.
Oh, it's in the BIOS.
It's in the BIOS, yeah. If you know that, it's
Power option.
What is?
Power option.
To do what?
So when you have your thing plugged in on our standard laptop, when you have this plugged in, it disables the one of us.
Well, depending on what order your priorities are.
So he was remoting in for me, making a change, and he's like, all right, check and see if it's working all right. I got to unplug you so I can get the advisor back on.
because it would drop the Guardian from advisor, just back and forth, and it just chewed up both of our time. It was just annoying. And then I found
Fire setting.
shower. I was just fix it by hitting disable and enable. Just fix it there.
No, it physically disables the hardware. It allocates one or the other.
Yeah. So if you have him remote in the Guardian,
Instructions.
so he can't see what's going on, or he can't think. Like I wanted him to take over the Guardian and then be able to do RDP to the advisor. He can't do that. I always do everything to my laptop.
And there's a whole bunch of questions that I just didn't take notes.
You can go into the BIOS settings and enable the hardware and the wireless. So when you're in the field, you can use the Ethernet
And the Wi-Fi.
the Wi-Fi so you can remote in, but you use the Ethernet to grab the advisor over the Sentry system.
The Guardian left or set up? The one that they lend out, they turn it off in IT. So
I think that when they patch it, one of the patches it puts it back. I don't know why.
Because they don't want to use two IP addresses. That's why they do it here. And
I did disable it. Let's just see what it works.
yeah. Somebody showed it to me one time. I just forgot what it was. Next time.
Yeah, so that's like we just talked about the manual way of adding numbers. If it's using a customer system, chances are they have a connection to a test like SAP or Unitrace or whatever else. And if all that's set up, which it should be, the way to get more numbers is real simple. There's this manual provisioning request menu where you select your manufacturer, your product, and your packaging level, or your product, your SPT format, because you have to know what it is, and the packaging level, and you can click submit, and it'll go out and get more numbers, or attempt to anyway. One way to check what SPT format is being used is you go to the product screen, find the product you're working with, click packaging levels, click the level you're interested in, and then click provisioning. And it will tell you what the SPT format is of SG1096, right? If you try to request for a different format, it's going to bomb out.
Where do you set up the connection to their thing? It's nothing we'll ever have to do, because that's something you have to do. Setting up to their SAP.
Yeah, the DE is just part of the DES configuration. It's under provisioning rules. So I have a couple. One is kind of my Citadel instance, and that's all set up. Yeah.
Right. At some point we create XML files. Like sometimes after we finish the lot and hand the lot client, okay, I want to see the numbers that I have commission.
Yeah.
Show me the XML file. There I can have no answer for that.
Yeah.
How can we really show like a small XML files we use, for instance, a small lot, create 4 or 5K and XML file.
It depends on what's already set up. I mean,
You might be talking about the Guardian laptop.
I'm Guardian.
Laptop. The Guardian, the
Most of
FAT.
the time we are asking FAT.
Do we install SQL Express or full?
no, it's full.
Okay, so you can
Yeah, there should actually be a Systech standard XML already set up. But you have to go to notification rules and see if anything's set up. There might be.
Do you have set up? Can you show us like how?
Yeah, I have one set up.
Okay.
set one up, run you one.
I want to. I have my Systech standard, so you can click add. Right.
So this guy starts like a lot and ended a lot, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna provide XML files.
Yeah. So if you do that, right, you come to notification rules.
Notification rules?
Yeah. You click add, and you type like test notification or something, whatever you want to write.
Okay, so that will be the file name, yeah?
No, that's just the name of the notification rule. That's just
Oh,
internal name.
Okay.
You select file system. You'll make sure it's active, and then you'll click save. When you click save, it'll create that new rule. You get a new entry created, and then you have to go to notification schema In newer versions, it's called notification schema. In old versions, it's called notification schema, or XML schema. So you click on notification or XML schema. There will be a big drop-down of different schemas available. If you just want something easy to show, use this. It's called standard notification schema. That's our Systech standard format. Select that from the notification schema drop-down. Then click parameters. And then basically, you don't even need to add any, or you can just click add all. And it'll add all of them with their default values. What's nice about the standard or Systech standard schema is there's like no configuration required, basically.
Yeah, but I mean, how am I gonna receive a particular lot information from that particular?
I know. Well, hold on. We'll get to that. So, right, this is just setting up. You have to set up the schema first. You set up the parameters, or maybe it exists already. Then you click File Settings. File Settings is where you determine where it's going to be created. Right, you have to click Browse, select the directory you want to get created at. Click OK, and you click Save, and it'll create that path where it'll output these files. You have to make sure that under General Server Settings, under Site Operation, your notification type is either automatic or manual. All right? If it's disabled, you're not going to be able to do anything with notification. So if you have a notification rule, the way to make products use it is under the manufacturing screen. Right? So when you have manufacturers, you assign products to manufacturers. You also assign notification rules to manufacturer. On this bottom right section here, it's called this button Select Sequence. When you click that, it'll show you what available rules you have. You select one that you want to apply. You move it over with the arrow button, and you click Accept. And that way, lots for that product, or any product under that manufacturer, will be able to use that new schema, or the existing schema. If all that's set up, you go to Manual Notification Reset, and there's 3 tabs: Failed, Initial, and Successful. Initial will be any lot that has not had a notification created for it. So you would come here, select your lot, right, by lot code, and it tells you also the product name or description of the product, and you just click Send. And it will try to create every notification that's assigned to that manufacturer. And it will go to wherever you put your file settings. And then you open that application, and if it was successful, and it should be with the Systech standard schema, it will be able to show.
So the notification rule is the format of the XML, how the format of the XML will look, right? That's each of the schema, and where it's going to save that XML, right? That's notification rule. So you create that, then you say, for this product, use this notification rule, right? And then when you run a lot with that product, you can come here and then manually create one of those XMLs using that rule that you assigned. So the second you say send, you can create an XML, you can double click on it, it will have all the information there.
Yeah, by lot.
Yeah.
I don't know, I mean, you guys have any kind of issue like client asking you XML numbers?
I haven't, I've never experienced it. I mean, that's the first time I've heard of a customer asking for it at the FAC. I've usually experienced, I guess, the notifications, like the one of the notifications at the SAC, not the PAT.
Doesn't matter FAC or SAC.
Yeah, because I know that they don't care about, a lot of them don't care about anything. So as long as that notification, as long as that XML file is in the designated folder or in there, that's all they care about. But I was wondering, like, because I mean, there's a time where like you end a lot and it doesn't get into the folder. Like, just from the FB's perspective on like ifs, are there like any things in the ifs on the environment that we should kind of troubleshoot, kind of just to make sure that
Yeah, if it's set up, if you expect it to be automatic, the first thing to check is on the Guardian under General Service Settings. Am I actually set to auto under notification settings? You know, if it's set to manual, it's not going to send automatically. It has to be set to auto. So let's say you ran your lot and then you change it to auto, it's not going to send anything, right?
so automatically has to just be sent before.
Yeah, before you end the lot. Before you end it, you can have a lot open, set it to auto, then end the lot. Yeah.
You have the Guardian DDS that has the very first few sections that show the events.
have what?
No, just open up any of the Guardian DDS. The
Yeah,
very
template.
few, template. Very few first few sections have all of the explanations of the triggers.
Oh, yeah, you mean like explanations? I'm actually putting some of that. Like, field.
Just open one of the diagrams. Yeah, one of them.
So, I mean, the Guardian DDSs have kind of a technical explanation of what happens to the system when you hit end lot. And this one, though, I think talks about notification specifically. Yeah, probably the notification event is the next one. So notification triggers, right? There's different like triggers for sending notifications.
Oh, this is trigger. This is notification trigger. This is what Citadel is asking Guardian to send.
So how does Guardian know when to send a notification? It's either automatically at end of lot or it's manually set. If for some reason you are set to auto, you end your lot and it doesn't send automatically, you have to make sure that there's like the SQL Server services are running, the communication agents running, and there's also one small caveat, it's the time of the advisor. So you have to make sure that the time of your advisor is in the same time zone and synced, or at the same time that your Guardian server is at. We had issues where like the advisor was like an hour ahead, and you entered your lot and notifications weren't sending because the Guardian's lot ended in the future, so it didn't send notifications. You have to make sure your advisor time is actually either the same as the Guardian or a little bit before. But time zone is really important too. So your local time might be correct, but if you actually look at the time zone setting, it's something small. Yeah.
Guardian by default uses UTC time. There is a checkbox that you can put to show local time, but all the events are in UTC time, which is region. It's not specific to a region, right? It's common. So sometimes when you see the dates, it may not make sense, but it's UTC a couple of hours off. So
GMT 0 basically. Yeah. We're right now in -4. So Guardian, a lot of systems, and this is just SQL behavior. It logs events in UTC time. But now in newer versions of Guardian, we can display events by local time. I think that's also under the general settings, which says display local daytime instead of UTC. When you look at like the event log or the error log, yeah, you know, okay, this happened at my server time. It's easier to track. Any questions about what we just talked about? I know it's a very kind of brief look at a lot of things. The next thing we'll talk about is SPT lot info block. So, basic building blocks of ifs. The very first thing you absolutely must have to open a lot, and really it's the only thing you technically need to actually open a serialized lot, is the SPT lot info block. There are a couple settings in here which determine whether or not you'll actually be able to communicate to Guardian. One of these is called enable transfers, and enable lot actions, which is somewhere that I can't see.
few more, 3 more.
This one? I can't see it. Yeah. I'm not duplicating. I'm not extending. Enable lot actions and enable transfers. Basically, enable lot actions, when set to true, that's saying, okay, am I allowing my advisor system to actually go out and open a lot in Guardian and say, okay, we're opening a lot, let's do this, let's get numbers or whatever else. When the enable lot actions is false, you can open a local lot, but it won't actually be a serialized lot that Guardian's aware of. Right? So if you want to open a serialized lot, you have to have enable lot action set to true. I've seen cases where, like advisor, you close the lot and you're trying to open another one, like a new one, and it says active lot mismatch or something like that. Sometimes it's because for some reason enable lot actions was set to false, and then they ended the lot, but all that did was end the lot locally. locally in tips. The lot and the end lot process was not completed all the way, meaning making lot and actually let and Guardian also.
So how would you get out of that if you're stuck in there? Would you have to start a lot with the same lot information and then just enable that?
That is the best way to reopen with the same lot code, the same expiration date, and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure your enable lot actions set to true, and enable transfers to set to true, and then try the end lot process again. If that still doesn't work, then there could, we can scrap the whole lot in the back end or do something else. But that's the best way. It's the cleanest way. Enable transfer determines whether or not advisor will actually transfer serialized data to the Guardian at like end of lot or in the middle of the lot. So in most cases it's going to be true. The only time you might see that it's false is if you have a lot info block on Sentry. I think these are forced false. Is that correct?
On 740.004. For that.
But basically, it should always be true if you're on the advisor. That way, your serialized lot is not going to function properly.
Gene, when did you say it would be false? What scenario?
If there's a lot entry, it might be false.
Okay, but otherwise true. Okay, thanks.
If your Sentry has configuration. That's kind of clear. One more important thing. In older versions, in the Guardian under products, you can set how big your lot's going to be. Right? There used to be a field called initial lot size. You can set that to like 100, and that way advisor would only ask for 100 numbers. You can start really small lots just for testing purposes. In 736 and above, there's a new field. Well, the field's always been there, but now it's actually used for something. In 736 and above, this expected lot size. That now determines how many serial numbers advisor is going to ask from Guardian to start a lot. Currently, you need 10,000 serial numbers to start a serialized lot, minimum, for your unit level. So this is determines only how many unit level it asks for. It calculates how many other levels to ask for based on the packaging hierarchy and the capacities of those other levels. But at minimum, you're going to need 10,000 unit serial numbers to start a lot. That's the lowest they can go in our current system. So 736 and above. I think in the newer version, they're going to drop that down because it's kind of ridiculous to have 10,000 as your minimum. There are a lot of customers who run lots that are just a few thousand items. Force them to do 10,000. So if you have less than 10,000 unit serial numbers on Guardian, you're not going to be able to start a lot. We'll say you need more. Make sure you have more than 10,000. Is that clear? So the last scheduled topic is rework. Is there anything specific you want to talk about rework?
We kind of touched it a little bit, but another thing I want to talk about, can you talk more, go back to it, John?
Yeah.
Can you talk about parent items to scrap end of lot, and what is orphan and how that ties into this?
Okay. So a couple more fields that we have here in the SPL info block. One's called parent items to scrap at end of lot, and what that does is if you have items which are either partially packed or don't belong to a parent. Partially packed, if you don't allow partials, this will happen, but let's say you do allow partials, so that way if you have any objects which are not packed to a certain level, which is specified in this dropdown, all those questions will be decommissioned at the end of a lot automatically. For example, let's say your parent items to scrap is set to pallet. If you have a whole bunch of cases none of them are aggregated to a pallet. They're all going to be
Auto decommission.
all yeah.
Yeah, that and plus below.
Yeah. They'll all be scrapped.
If you go back to Guardian, you had few auto decommission in your.
Everything. As long as it's commissioned.
So if you look under status, the one that says auto decommissioned, right? These are cartons that they were loose at the end of the lot. They were not packed ever, right? They never got packed. So these are items that are loose. Based on that setting, as a lot info setting, they will be auto decommissioned. So in this configuration, it was pallet. Even though pallet is the highest level, it's going to skip pallet, right, obviously. But it's going to include case, bundle, and item at unit.
So you can't go below unit.
No.
So no matter what unit will be.
Well, if you put it disabled, it's not
disabled,
yeah, auto decommissioning.
Yeah. I would have pallets decommissioned. These are like runoff at this permit lot. I don't allow partials, so if I have a partially packed pallet, that gets decommissioned too.
On 740, if you have a closed pallet that is not commissioned, closed pallet has a number, will also be auto decommissioned, right? But a closed pallet that is commissioned, that gets that random number replaced with an actual SSC, that's not part of this. That will not be auto decommissioned. You know what I mean? So you can leave like a closed pallet at the end of the lot. In 736, it allowed a closed pallet. What ends up happening is you now have a closed pallet with that weird number. Yeah. That's not commissioned.
You can change that in an active lot, and it'll take place in that.
You change it.
So if a lot of times customer runs like 200 cartons so that we can run a test, and they're like, oh, we gotta stop this lot. We're gonna kill all of these. With that active lot, can you change that?
Yeah, you can. You can put it to disabled.
And close it, and it'll say,
Yes.
oh man, we can use that. That happens all the time.
But
I'll spend an hour running 200 cartons, and we gotta end this lot.
I mean, just suspend it in those situations.
A lot of people don't use it. AZ doesn't use suspend. Who else? I think Alcon. They don't use their suspend or whatever.
Yeah, you can just disable it. That way you'll just have a bunch of loose objects. Disabled, I don't know the difference between disabled and none.
None is the packaging level, likely.
Yeah, but like, I don't know if you use.
If you end the lot, then how are you going to reuse? It's going to be in the old lot anyway.
So they couldn't. But if we have enabled the same lot.
No, it is a different lot. In Guardian, it's a different lot, even if you use the same lot ID.
Yeah. So they're still scrapped.
When you do the rework, it's not going to show green.
It's going to show green. It's
It's not going to show green.
Yeah.
Green would be like when it's from this current lot.
What it might say like active in different lot?
When you add the lot,
It's going to show you the same lot ID because you use the same lot ID, which is not allowed. But it's not from the same lot. So it's Guardian.
You will have to put it.
I know. We run into some of these issues because we're like, oh, it's not packing. And you end up saying it's not green, which is not from this lot, but the lot number is the same.
I don't know why they don't like suspenders. Some they just don't use it.
So,
the way at least that is that option you have for enable those two options, enable lot. Like when you send the information when you close the lot, you can disable those two. You can close the lot and do anything else. So whenever you want to run this again, you enable it and run the same lot.
That might work. Like, think about AZ, man. It takes about 2 hours to make 20.
Oh yeah,
It's so slow.
Yeah, but we suspended the last there. But I had a quick question. Like, I don't know if anybody encountered this issue. Like, I mean, it happened at a couple of startups where we would suspend lots, and then obviously, I guess changes were made to the edge. But like, once you make those changes, you can't resume the lot, because you can't resume and suspend the lot Is there currently no workaround around that, or?
No, I mean, it's Camp 5, man. You can't really configure to change it, resume.
Because yeah, it was one of those things where like we made so many cartons, and then like we read a lot, they were like, okay, let's suspend it, and then we realized that the changes that we made the inch, and then we made the changes, and we're like, wait a minute, we can't.
Nah, that's CFR Part 11, whatever. Fine.
How about they change the name of or something in Guardian? Well,
Because when you suspend a lot, it takes every single data from SPL, a lot of info, it transfers them to Guardian, and once you put it back the same exact way. Doesn't matter what you change, it's going to go back to the way it was. Otherwise, it's, our system is not CFR compliant. It has to be.
Because remember, I was at one place, I think B&L, Tampa. You might have been down there. They had the same. It was like when you go to resume, they had the same lot number like 8 times. How was that possible? We couldn't get rid of them, and the guy was just freaking out. So you guys jumped in and heard so much stuff.
So that's why, you know how we allow lot number reuse? That should always be disabled.
It was probably set, but some changes were made, so those ones were hosed. Yeah, when you tried to bring them back, all kinds of things happened. They had networking issues. Like you could go to the parent type and hit the drop down, and it would be blank. And then about a minute later, it would be full again. And then about a minute later, it was blank. I was like, oh, what's going on? They were dropping.
What was the other? So they will law and then what else? Scrapping and then what else?
Yeah, so you know how the SPT lot info block has the expiration date, text, format, locale, and date? That particular date has to be has a very unique format that that you must use, right? Plus, this becomes the expiration date in notification.
Correct.
So anytime you have some of those issues where my notification expiration date is not in the right format or whatever, or this one complaints, we always have a new Guardian G expiration date HTML format created. You ever noticed that new lock control variable? G Guardian G expiration date, right?
Yeah, it's like month.
Yeah. It's slightly different. Use that one instead of the way it shows here.
Yeah, it's colorful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, gee.
Same thing with the manufacturing date. Often the manufacturing date, once you upgrade, the manufacturing date requirement is slightly different than before. It has to be in a certain specific format, and if you don't carry that in your SPT lot info block, it shows up incorrectly in XML. Otherwise, every single one of these fields, right? For example, lot code, expiration date, text. They're all field names that you can refer to with curly brackets from a format block. And every single lock control variables are pulled in automatically using the lock control variable. That. So every single one of those that you have in Builder, they all are accessible from without you having to have an alias to bring them in. They're all available with curly brackets.
Expression date. Curly bracket or equal to the
Equal curly bracket.
Equal to the same way you put a lock control variable.
Same, exact same field name. Call the EXP date unit print. You can call it directly with that name.
No, I'm saying here, and then the down.
Oh, the left.
That one, the left.
So the ones on the top, right? The one that has the ABC with the edit symbol on it. You can refer to every single one of those fields using that exact field name, and it will give you the value that's showing up under value.
There's an expiration date in format.
Mm-hmm.
So is it?
Yeah, that's a local. That's a control lock control variable.
That's the same lock control variable we use.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah. And the other thing is, all of our current configuration in Sentry, we use SPT lot info block to bring in values from Builder into it. Right? So when you're having issues that Sentry is complaining that Guardian is not there, don't remove the SPT allowed info block. It's going to break other stuff, right? We use for non-serialized as well, non-serialized and serialized. SPT allowed info block has to be there. If it complains, you enable lot action has to be disabled on Sentry, and the other one, the enable transfer. Those should have to be disabled on Sentry. But don't get rid of the SPT allowed info block.
I guess that's the use case there. There's a default. Just for now about what do you want to talk about for rework?
Also, bunch of stuff with rework. Orphans, post-lot.
Oh, you want to talk about orphans? Sorry, that was the other thing. About lot info block.
Yes.
So if your parent items to scrap is set to disabled, you're going to have orphans, which are just unaggregated children, right? And that could be any level that doesn't have a parent, right? So you can have a case that's an orphan because it doesn't have a parent. If the product's expected to have a higher level, like a pallet. So if your product has pallets, then you have a bunch of cases which don't have pallets, but they're still commissioned. So they would be considered an orphan state. There is a setting on Guardian where you can allow the existence of orphans. That kind of sounds mean, right? But we all, check to allow orphans. There's only a couple use cases where you actually should be using this. It depends on the client. Most clients use a partially packed parent. There are only a couple, I think, out there that will have loose children. And most of this has to do with how the data gets sent to any system after Guardian and notifications. Only some notification schemes actually allow orphans. So the allow orphans is used in conjunction with the notifications. But pallet cannot be orphaned unless you have something higher than a pallet, right? So if your product's set up to have like a shipping container above a pallet, then pallet is orphaned. But if your product's, if pallet is your highest level, then that's your highest level. That's your top parent. So this product has cases. I can't have cases that are orphans because that's the highest level. I can have bundles or cartons that are orphans. And that's more so determined by your advisor configuration. If you actually have orphans, right? So if you don't partially pack something, you just have like a bunch of cases or a bunch of cartons commissioned, but loose, that requires a specific configuration. Like you can't be scrapping items, and you'll have to have a process which commissions unpacked objects. Because not all configurations will even have like a commissioned state for an unpacked object sometimes. That's kind of a brief look at it. It's not really that common in my experience. It's hard to report commissioned orphans.
So parent items to scrap and double lot, does it include orphans?
Theoretically, it should. But I know you were running into a case where it wasn't doing that. I don't know why. Did you have allow orphans checked?
Yeah.
And that's probably why.
Allow orphans gets rid of parent items to scrap end of lot, so it excludes it essentially.
Awesome. So I guess I kind of counted what I said about this.
So orphans are any packaging level that was part of a parent, and then parent was decommissioned, right? So now it's loose, but it was part of a parent before.
Oh, it was not part of the parent, it's not orphan.
No, it's not orphan.
Oh.
So
I thought it is.
no. A carton that never made it into a bundle at the end of the lot is treated as a loose item.
Okay.
An item that was part of a bundle and then you decommission the bundle is an orphan. End of the lot is treated as an orphan, right? So your parent items to scrap end of lot setting, right, will determine, and your allow orphan checkmark in Guardian will determine whether or not the orphans are ordered decommission at the end of the lot.
Oh. I thought it was the same.
Yeah, that's the two.
Yeah.
No, orphans are different than loose.
Yeah, I mean, it's different logically, Yeah, but I thought once you had a parent, too.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if there's those status or the state of the item, so like if you decommission its parent, they're not decommissioned, they're a commission, they're in their previous state.
The parent died.
You live on.
You have no parents, so you are all.
But if you
That
never,
makes sense though, man. I never thought about it that way.
you can also have an orphan if you were commissioned but never aggregated, you can still be an orphan.
That's what I'm confused. If you're commission,
No.
you'll never be aggregated. You cannot be orphan because you never had a parent.
What comes first, chicken or the egg?
You might have a chicken to be orphan.
I mean,
That's what I was thinking.
partially, yes.
If you commission and you never been aggregated, you are orphan because you are there. And if you have parents and your parents are the commissions, you are orphan because you don't have parents. That's not the case. You are orphan only if you were aggregated.
And
I
then
don't think it's only.
Yeah.
It can't be.
Yeah.
I thought everything to do have the parents.
I had that question
It
many
only
times.
determines on the state, I think.
No. That's internal tag ID that has clear definition that it, at one point belonged to the parent.
And we never get to see this, you know. And let everything.
But it matters. It matters. When it goes to Guardian, it matters.
In real operation, yes. And what we do in the field.
Yeah, but you can get asked, questions about it.
Yeah.
Why is this not decommissioned? Or maybe it's orphan.
I mean, it is, if it does not belong to packaging structure, it's become everything obsolete.
Alright. Anything on rework? Because that would be
Nothing was good.
again, very brief look at a lot of different topics. 2 hours, not enough time to cover one topic in depth, in my opinion.
I think we had a few good discussions.
Yeah, like I said, putting together just a document that you can use. If you want it, it'll cover everything we talked about and add some step-by-step, explanations and guides on how to do some stuff.
Yes, please finish it, so we'll include it into the FE guide.
Yeah.
It's lacking some details.
Well, I'll finish it. I mean, I don't think it's time. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And I'll send it to you for review.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Gene.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope I was able to help.
So our traditional Guardian training is like 2 days long with Gene. Obviously, that had to be condensed to only 2 hours, but.
And just
So we take a short break and then we do master data.
Yeah, you don't know where it is, but you'll have to roll. There's only one, we have a middle room.
Yeah. Unless there's there's one
Even further away.
even further away.
Go ahead. Check it out. It's broken. Sorry. Thank you, sir.
killed my whole battery. 2 hours was still out there.
I need a field of view this much, with the code this big, with no stand up like that, no need to try that. No response. Boom, so those are 2 options. This should be 4 cameras and this should be 2 cameras.